I've built 3 new decks you might want to take a look at. It is of course going to be the Mega Meganium, Mega Emboar, and Mega Feraligatr. And in this video, I'm going to talk about what the decks do, how they work, and how you can adopt them to start winning games with them right away. So without further ado, let's dive in. Alright, so we're kicking things off with Mega Feraligatr. So I think Mega Feraligatr really complements the already existing control type Feraligatr deck. So what does Mega Feraligatr do? It has this attack called Killer Crunch for 2 water energies and 1 colorless. And it says, if your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it, this attack does 200 more damage, effectively hitting 400 damage, one-shotting anything in the format, oftentimes even through Hero Escape. So how does this complement the other Feraligatr? Well, the other Feraligatr does have the Torrential Heart ability, which states once during your turn, you may put 5 damage counters on this Pokemon. And if you do, during this turn, attacks used by this Pokemon do 120 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So essentially, all this combined, we're going to use Feraligatr's attack with Relicanth, because Relicanth is a very interesting tech card, because it has the Memory Dive ability, which states each of your evolved Pokemon can use any attacks from its previous evolution. And we're going to use that with the Croconaws attack, which has Reverse Thrust. So normally, Reverse Thrust used by Croconaw only does 30 damage. But if you use Reverse Thrust when you evolved into Feraligatr, do note Rare Candy does not work on it. The previous evolution needs to be on the bottom of it. So Feraligatr can use the Torrential Heart ability and then use the Reverse Thrusts for 120 more damage. So effectively you're doing 150 damage. Alright, good, Wanzi. Where does this take us? Because 150 damage doesn't really do anything in this format. So you're effectively going to use your ability Torrential Heart, you're going to transfer over the damage with Monkey Dory's Adrenal Brain, or if you do not have anything set up for a future Mega Feraligatr turn, you just use Torrential Heart, use the Reverse Thrust attack, and then switch into something the opponents cannot KO, something like the Mimikyu or the Klefki, to completely shut down everything on their board state. But do note, if you do promote the Klefki, then your Psyduck and your Relicanth and your Monkey Dory do not have any abilities anymore, so use this wisely. So how does the turn structure work with this deck? So ideally you want to go second, because as all controlled archetypes, you want to go second, see what your opponent is playing in order to know how to work against it. And the ideal start is to start off with an Arven, fetching out Precious Trolley and TM Evolution, because you're really going to need it, because you always need that middle stage Croconaw. And then you're obviously going to evolve your Turtles into Croconaw, ideally 2 of them at a time. So then in next turn you can manually evolve into Feraligatr, or perhaps even Mega Feraligatr. If the opponent is playing a big basic type deck, you can start swinging with it right away. Of course, you still need to get 3 energies on it, but through the means of counter gain, we can cheat those into play, because counter gain allows us to have 1 colorless energy less if we're behind on prize cards, and if we're going second and using TM Evolution on our first turn, the odds are very high the opponent is going to knock something out on their following turn. But then of course we can achieve this through the means of Crispin. We can accelerate a water energy with a Crispin, get the dark energy into our hands, and then accelerate another water energy or perhaps even the luminous energy onto the Mega Feraligatr in combination with the counter gain. But those are all ideal situations. That's not going to happen every time, but it would be awesome if it did. Of course, I did think about some other stadiums like the Risky Ruins or even the Calamitous Snowy Mountain, but I think Artisan does give you more consistency to build up your deck, especially in the early stages. Of course, you do not want to give the Artisan to your opponent. If they're not having a good start, then you're obviously helping them out, but it's obviously helping you out as well, especially in the late game, because Monkey Dory has 110 HP, so Buddy Buddy Puffin does not work on it. So that's why I think the Precious Trolley is the superior A-spec in this deck. Alright, now moving on, I think Counter Catcher is very ideal, and we need to play 3 copies of it, because this is a more controlled type archetype, and you're obviously going to get behind on prizes until you have the comeback capabilities, and the Counter Catcher is going to help you do that. Other than that, we have a pretty basic supporter line. We have 4 Lily's Determination for the support draw. We have 4 Arven to fetch out our Precious Trolley, or Technical Machine Evolution, but also the Hero Escape, because Hero Escape onto the Mimikyu against an opponent that doesn't have an answer to Mimikyu is very disruptive. Like, just imagine they're playing Goldengo and they're going to hit you with the Soul Rock every single time. Your Mimikyu has 170 HP, you have 2 Monkidori in play, you can channel over 60 damage each turn, so essentially, that opponent's Soul Rock is only doing 10 damage. And of course, having the Air Balloon onto the Relicanth, for instance, lets you free retreat it back into the Feraligatr, use the ability again, and then switch again into the Mimikyu through the means of reverse thrusts. Alright, and also being a control archetype, we have, of course, Iono, because especially in the late game, Iono is going to be very disruptive against our opponent. And because the Mega Feraligatr needs 3 energy in order to attack, or just the 1 energy if you're going to reuse reverse thrust, through the means of Feraligatr, or you can even use reverse thrust with the Mega Feraligatr, but why should you? But then again, it's also an interesting fact to note, because this Croconaw evolve into the Mega Feraligatr, and if the Relicanth is into play, you can use the reverse thrust with the Mega Feraligatr and switching back into the Mimikyu. So you can have a board state of up to 3 Pokemon, one of them including the Mimikyu, perhaps even a Monkidori, Relicanth, and then the Mega Feraligatr, switching back into the Mimikyu every single turn, perhaps with an Air Balloon on it so you can retreat back into the Mega Feraligatr and start swinging every single turn because they don't have an answer to one-shot the Mega Feraligatr and they can't damage the Mimikyu. So I think this is a really interesting deck to play around with, so I'm curious to know what you guys will think of it. Alright, and let's head into the next one. Alright, and next up we have the Mega Meganium. Again, this Mega Meganium has a lot of potential because it can do a lot of damage and it ramps up very fast if we have the other Meganium in play. So what does this Meganium do exactly? It has the Giant Bouquet attack, which has 70 base damage, and it states, this attack does 50 more damage for each grass energy attached to this Pokemon. So we can cheat more grass energies into play through the means of Meganium. So let's do the math on this. It needs 3 colorless energy in order to attack. If you have a Meganium in play, and grass energies attached to your Pokemon are counted double. So you can already start attacking if you have 2 energies into play, because you only need 3 colorless. Alright, so you have 2 grass energies attached to it. Essentially, this counts as 4 of them if you have Meganium into play. So 4 energies attached to it. Note, 2 energies with Meganium does 50 more, so essentially 200 damage plus the 70 base damage. So if you have 2 grass energies attached to it, you're doing 270 damage. And again, for each additional grass energy attached to it, you do another 100 damage with the other Meganium into play. So expect to bring a calculator if you're going up against this Mega Meganium or you're playing Mega Meganium itself, because that's going to help you out a lot. But then you're wondering, what does the Meganium do? So it has this wild growth ability. Just like I said before, each basic grass energy attached to all of your Pokemon provides 2 grass energy instead of just the 1. But the effect of wild growth doesn't stack, obviously, because that will be mind-blowingly broken. Just imagine 1 energy being counted for 4. No, not going to do that, alright? And then obviously we're playing the pre-evos like Bayleaf and Chikorita because we're playing the Forest of Vitality. And for those of you who don't know what Forest of Vitality does, each player's grass Pokemon can evolve into their grass Pokemon during the turn they play those Pokemon, except their first turn. So this counts as going first or going second. It is still your first turn. So next turn, you can evolve anything into anything. No, it needs to be in the same evolution line, but you can basically put your Chikorita into play. And if you have Bayleaf and Meganium in your hand, you can instantly evolve into the Bayleaf and into the Meganium. But you obviously can't skip an evolution. So if you have Chikorita and Meganium in your hands, but you don't have the Bayleaf, so through the means of Forest of Vitality, you can't skip that evolution. You need to have it in your hands. But through the means of Dawn, we can fetch out those Pokemon, obviously, to evolve into. So another question, how are we getting the grass energies onto our Pokemon? And that's where Tealmask Ogerponi X comes into play, because it has that Teal Dance ability, which states once during your turn, you may attach a grass energy from your hand to this Pokemon. If you attached any energy in this way, you draw a card, which essentially is a draw supporting Pokemon. It's also an attacker, and it accelerates energy. It just matches perfectly in this deck. But then your question might be, hold up, Onesie, obviously, how are you switching those energies from the Ogerpon onto the Meganium? Well, that's where the Mega Venusaur comes into play, because I think Mega Venusaur is not a great attacker on its own, but it's a very good supportive Pokemon, and it has that solar transfer ability, which states as often as you like during your turn, you may use this ability, you may move a basic grass energy from one of your Pokemon to another of your Pokemon, which essentially lets us charge up multiple attackers. And the main attackers are going to be Mega Meganium, Mega Venusaur in some occasions. We have the Teal Mask Ogerpon, which can also attack, and the damage can ramp up very fast, but not as much as the Mega Meganium, but obviously that's going to be worth 3 prizes, and the Teal Mask is only going to be worth 2. Alright, moving on. The Toedscruel EX is also going to be a good attacker with a Colony Rush, because it does 40 more damage for each of your benched Pokemon that have any grass energies attached to it. So you don't necessarily have to attach energies onto the Toedscruel, just the one will suffice. If you have multiple energies onto your benched Pokemon, this attack's damage is ramped up, so you can basically preserve the energies and only attack with 1 energy onto the Toedscruel EX. But then obviously, if you're not going to be attacking with the Toedscruel EX, you can evolve it into the regular Toedscruel, which we're going to go over later. Another main attacker is going to be the Genesect with its Bug Cannon. Because Bug Cannon does 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, do note this can also be the benched Pokemon. So 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each grass energy attached to this Pokemon. So imagine 5 energies being attached to that Pokemon. It does 100 damage to one of the benched Pokemon. But with the Meganium in play, the energies are doubled, which states the attack's damage is doubled as well. So essentially, with 5 energies attached to it, this Bug Cannon could do 200 damage. But then ideally, we need to attach 6 of them, because then we can snipe the Pheasantipity or Latias or other Pokemon onto the opponent's board state. And then we also have the Regigigas. So the Regigigas can attack for 2 grass energies with the Meganium in play, obviously, and it has the Dual Breaker attack, which has 100 base damage and does 230 more damage if the opponent's Pokemon is a Terra-type Pokemon. So this is going to be your answer against Dragapult, Charizard EX, and various other Terra Pokemon. And let's go back to the Toedscruel I said, because this Toedscruel is a tech card against something that is very recovery heavy, like Golden Go, or perhaps even Gardevoir with the Night Stretchers. This Toedscruel completely shuts it down with its Nine-Mold Colony ability, which states cards in your opponent's discard pile cannot be put into their hand by an effect of your opponent's ability or by trainer cards. So this shuts down Night Stretchers, Superior Energy Retrieval, and even Max Rod. And of course, being a grass tech, you cannot skip on the Budgie. Obviously, because there will be moments where you can start second and use Itchy Pollen on your first turn, completely shutting down the opponent from playing item cards and to set up their board. But then we also have the Tatsugiri, and obviously this is not going to be an attacker, but it is a very good support Pokemon, because it has Attract Customers ability, which states once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may look at the top 6 cards of your deck, reveal a supporter card you find there, and then shuffle your deck, which is basically going to be a Pokegear into a Pokemon, which is very good. For instance, if your Pokemon is getting knocked out and after the knockout, you can promote the Tatsugiri, fetching out a supporter card that might save your next turn. And of course, this being a grass-heavy deck, we cannot miss out on the Bug Catching set, because the Bug Catching set is going to be ideal to find ourselves the Bayleaf, the Chikorita, the Bulbasaur, and as well as our main attackers and our supportive Pokemon, right? And if all else fails, and you've played your Bug Catching set and you're left with nothing, you can always play the Lily's Determination or perhaps even Dawn to search out your Pokemon. And I've also chosen the Max Rod to be the superior ace spec here, because you need to get your Pokemon back into your hands to evolve through the means of Forest of Vitality, and getting those energies back into your hands is very vital for your setup as well as your main damage output, because everything is based around those grass energies. And since we're not playing any superior energy retrieval, but we can retrieve them back through Lana's Aid or the Max Rod, so this is going to be very important. But then you're going to say, like, hold up, why can't you play superior energy retrieval and play something like the secret box on top? Well, I don't think we can get rid of any resources we have in our hands, because nothing is really expendable here, and we need everything to be able to evolve, to attach, and everything in this deck has a meaning somehow. So the only recovery we have is the Night Stretcher, the Max Rod, and the Lana's Aid. So we have to be careful planning our recovery. Alright, let's jump into the last one. Right, and last up, we have the Mega Emboar. So Mega Emboar has only one attack for 2 fire energies and 1 colorless, doing 320 damage. But this Pokemon does 60 damage to itself. So in a way, this deck could also work with Munkidori, but having Pokemon that can one-shot this Mega Emboar, Munkidori is not doing very much. But it's a very cool fire-based deck. So let's go over it. Obviously, we're going to have our Pignite and our Tepig to evolve from, but we're only also having the Mega Camerupt to have a backup attacker. Because essentially, this Mega Camerupt can attack for 1 energy and doing 240 damage if the opponent's Pokemon is burned, and we're going to achieve that burn through the means of Volcarona. You know me, I've already used this card in a past version of the Cerulege, being able to throw away the fire energies into the discard pile to accelerate even faster. But essentially what this Volcarona does, it has this Torrid Scales ability. So you must discard a fire energy card from your hand in order to use this ability. But once during your turn, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon burned, which essentially is going to do 20 more damage in between turns to that Pokemon, and then you need to flip a coin. If tails, they're still burned. So if their turn ends, then the Pokemon has 20 more damage on it, which ramps up fast. Unlike Poison, which only takes for 10. But then we also have the second attack on the Mega Camera, which does 280 damage, but we need to discard 2 energy from that Pokemon, which is not ideal. But we can use that attack later on if we don't have an Emboar into play to one-shot weaker attackers. Or through the means of burn, we can hit essentially 300 on this Volcanic Meteor. And then of course, we have a 1 prize attacker being the Reshiram. So for 1 fire energy, this combustion does 30 damage, but it's all about the burning flare. So for 4 fire energy, this attack does 240 damage and does 60 damage to itself, which we can ideally use 3 times in a row if the situation requires it. But then you're wondering, like, hold up, Onesie, you can only attach 1 fire energy each turn. Well, that's where the Oricorio comes into play. This is not going to be a main attacker, this is going to be our main support Pokemon because of that exciting turbo ability, which states as often as you like during your turn, if you have any Fire Mega Evolution Pokemon into play, you may use this ability. You can attach a basic fire energy card from your hand to one of your benched fire Pokemon. So essentially, this Oricorio EX is going to charge up our attackers like the Reshiram, like the Mega Camerupt, and like the Mega Emboar, as well as the Volcarona, but it's not ideal to attack with. It only does 70 damage. Alright, and then in order to fetch out this fire type energies, we have the Fire Breather, which states search your deck for up to 7 fire energy cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. And when you have the Oricorio into play, you can just spread the fire energies onto your board like it's nothing, charging everything up in a single turn. That is just mind-blowing. You can spread the fire energies like 2 there, 1 there, spreading everything all over again, and if something gets knocked out, we can accelerate them back with the Energy Recycler, playing another Fire Breather on top of it next turn, and get those 5 energies back into your hands. This deck is broken. It has a lot of acceleration, but obviously the setup is going to be slow. So that's why I include 4 copies of Lily's Determination, you know, to reshuffle our hand into our deck and have more odds to evolve into the Pokemon we really need. Also, you cannot negate the fact that the opponent can trap one of your Pokemon in play, leaving it there in the active spot, essentially going to be Volcarona. But we can retreat their Volcarona, even if it's retreat locked, through the means of the Surfer. And then I've also added the Heroescape in this deck, because I think a Heroescape onto your main attacking Pokemon is going to be huge to make it very tanky and very disruptive for your opponent to get rid of it. So just imagine a Heroescape onto your Mega Emboar having 480 HP. Yeah, try to one-shot that. Of course, Mega Feraligatr fans will go like, this is easy for us. obviously, because it's water weak. But other than that, if you're going up against another deck, this Hero Escape might save your day. Or, just put Hero Escape onto your favorite support Pokemon like Oricorio, essentially having 290 HP, only worth 2 prize cards, and it's just not worth knocking it out when it has a Hero Escape attached to it. But also, when it's down to, I don't know, let's say 100 or 150 HP, you can also use the Professor Tiro scenario to get rid of the damage, get the Pokemon back into your hands, and switch in another Pokemon you want to attack with next, and deny a prize card taken by your opponent. And then I've also added the Team Rocket's Watchtower, because I do really think Terra Box is going to be a problem next format, and we need to be prepared for it. So shutting down this Noctowl is going to be huge for this deck, because that Wellspring Mask, Ogerpon's Torrential Pump is going to be a big problem, sniping every Pokemon in this deck. And then of course you're going to say, but Onesie, you can tack in the Shaman or something. Obviously you can tack in a Shaman, but having a grass type Pokemon into a fire deck doesn't really make any sense, but it also makes it a target to clutch up or just to retreat lock with a Sob. So that's why I didn't include it. But then of course we can get it out of the active spot with the Surfer and the Tura, but when the supporters are expanded, we are vulnerable, not able to get our Shaman out in any way. So I'm curious to see what you guys think of these 3 new deck concepts that I made, so let me know what you think of it. Will you try it out yourself, or do you have some extra thoughts on it? Please let me know. And that wraps up today's video. If you find this video helpful, please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, as well as letting me know down in the comments what you think of these 3 new decks. Will you try them out, or do you have some thoughts about it? Or you just want to completely throw it over and make a new build? I would love to hear all about it. And if you want to stick around for more videos, I've got more deck profiles, gameplay videos, and learn to play coming your way. And with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one.